Hello everyone. Today we are going to learn how to identify different textile fibers using various methods. You already know some techniques such as visual inspection, burning test, microscope observation, and staining test. Now we will focus on chemical testing. Chemical tests use specific chemicals to dissolve or react with fibers, helping us confirm their identity. In today's lesson, we will learn how to identify cotton, wool, acetate, nylon, and polyester using different chemical solutions. Before starting the test, it is important to understand which fiber dissolves in which chemical. For example, here we can see in your instruction, if your earlier test like visual inspection, burning test, or microscopic test suggests that the unknown fiber is cellulosic fiber such as cotton, flax, rayon, then the first step is to use 70% concentrate sulfuric acid. If the fiber dissolves, you can confirm that it belongs to the cellulosic group. From there, you will compare the chemical test results with observations you made earlier. By comparing all the findings, visual inspection, burning characteristic, microscope view, and chemical solubility, you will be able to make a final conclusions about fiber's name. Now, let's introduce the chemicals and the fume hood. This is called fume hood. Since these chemicals are hazardous, we must always perform our test inside the fume hood, not on the regular lab table. Today, we will be using the following chemicals: 70% concentrated sulfuric acid, 5.25% sodium hypochlorite, acetone, hydrochloric acid, and nitric acid. Now, we are going to test our fibers one by one. Suppose that after visual inspection, burning test, and microscope observation, you narrow down that the sample is cellulosic fiber such as cotton. In this case, the next step is to apply 70% concentrated sulfuric acid. If the fiber dissolves in these chemicals, we can conclude that the sample is cotton. So, this is a cotton fiber sample, and I'm now going to place it in the sulfuric acid and observe the reaction. Let's see what happens when the fiber comes into contact with the chemical. Now I will stir the cotton fiber in the sulfuric acid and wait for a few minutes to see the results, and I'll come back here later. Wow! After about 3 minutes, the fiber has completely dissolved in the sulfuric acid. So this confirms that the sample is cellulosic, or this is cotton fiber. Now we are going to test our second fiber is wool. We know that wool and silk are protein-based fibers. So after visual inspection, burning test, and microscope observation, if you narrow down that your sample is wool, the next step is to use sodium hypochlorite. So if the fiber dissolves in the sodium hypochlorite, we can confirm that the sample is wool. This is sodium hypochlorite. I'm now going to place the wool fiber sample into the sodium hypochlorite and observe the reaction. Let's see what happens when the fiber comes into contact with the chemical, sodium hypochlorite. Now I will gently stir the fiber in the sodium hypochlorite and wait a minute for the results. After about 3 minutes, the fiber has completely dissolved. So this confirms that the sample is wool fiber. Now we are going to test different man-made or synthetic fibers. So after visual inspection, burning test and microscope observation, if you narrow down that the sample is synthetic, we use chemical testing to be 100% sure. In many cases, those first 3 tests like visual inspection, burn test and microscope observation, the test already give you a strong idea of the fiber type, but chemical tests provide confirmation. So for the synthetic fibers, we must follow this testing order. Like here you can see in the instruction sheet, acetone, hydrochloric acid and then nitric acid. So if the fiber dissolves in acetone, we can conclude it is acetate fiber. If it dissolves in hydrochloric acid, then it is nylon fiber. If it dissolves in nitric acid, the fiber is acrylic. If the fiber doesn't dissolve in any of these chemicals, then it is polyester. This is an acetate fiber, and I'm now going to place this fiber sample into the acetone and observe the reaction. Let's see what happens when the fiber comes into contact with the chemical. Now I will gently stir the fiber in acetone and wait to see the results. So after a few seconds, the fiber has completely dissolved. So this confirms that the sample is an acetate fiber. Now we are going to test the next fiber. After visual inspection, burning test and microscope observation, if you narrow down that the sample is synthetic, we use chemical testing to confirm the exact fiber name. For now, let's assume we don't know the fiber name precisely, but we are certain that it belongs to the man-made synthetic group. So to identify it correctly, we will follow the testing order, like first acetone, then hydrochloric acid, and finally nitric acid. Then we will observe the result. Then based on the results, we will conclude the fiber name. Now I'm going to place this fiber in acetone and observe the results. If the fiber dissolves in acetone, we can conclude that it is acetate fiber. If it doesn't dissolve, we will move on to the next chemical, hydrochloric acid. After waiting a few minutes, we can see that the fiber did not dissolve in acetone. This confirms that the sample is not acetate. So we will proceed to the next chemical test. Since this fiber did not dissolve in acetone, so we will now test it with hydrochloric acid. If the fiber dissolved in hydrochloric acid, we can conclude that the sample is nylon fiber. Within a few seconds, you can see the fiber dissolves completely in hydrochloric acid. This confirms that the sample is nylon fiber. Now we are going to test another fiber. After visual inspection, burning test, and microscope observation, if you narrow down that the sample is synthetic, so chemical testing is used to confirm the exact fiber type. For this demonstration, let's assume we don't yet know the fiber name, but we are confident that it belongs to the man-made or synthetic fiber group. So to identify it accurately, we will follow the testing order. At first acetone, then hydrochloric acid, and finally nitric acid. Now I'm going to place this fiber sample in acetone and carefully observe the reaction. If the fiber dissolves, we can conclude that it is acetate fiber. If it does not dissolve, then we will move on to the next chemical, hydrochloric acid. After waiting a few minutes, we can see that the fiber did not dissolve in acetone. So this confirms that the sample is not acetate. So we will continue with the next chemical test. Since this fiber did not dissolve in acetone, we will now test it with hydrochloric acid. If the fiber dissolves, we can conclude that the sample is nylon fiber. After waiting a few minutes, we can see that the fiber did not dissolve in hydrochloric acid. This confirms that the sample is not nylon. So we will proceed to the next chemical test. Since this fiber did not dissolve in hydrochloric acid, we will now test it with nitric acid. If the fiber dissolves, we can conclude that the sample is acrylic fiber. But after waiting a few minutes, we can see that the fiber did not dissolve in nitric acid either. This confirms that the fiber is not acrylic because the fiber did not dissolve in acetone, hydrochloric acid, or nitric acid. According to our instruction, we can conclude that the sample is polyester fiber.